Okay, everyone, welcome to Monday Momentum. Today, we're going to be talking about how to redesign your career without really starting over. And this is something I think a lot of people struggle with, a lot of high achievers. They think maybe I've outgrown what I'm doing right now, but I don't want to start over, right? Like you've been doing it for so long, you're really good at it, but you're like, I want more, but I don't know what to do, right? And that's the thought that a lot of us have, but we've also been taught to stay stuck, right? Because we're like, okay, we made this decision. This is the path that we're on. How dare we think about pivoting? How dare we think about moving, right? And so sometimes we are taught that the false choice is to like just stay stuck or like burn it all down, right? But I guess today my thought is, what if there's a third option? Like, what if you don't have to break everything down? What if you could read it? What if like redesigning is possible, right? Without having to like scatter everything. Maybe you redesign it to look a little different. That's what I want us to kind of think about today. And I guess my first question I would like to ask the audience is like, how many of you like have felt like you've outgrown your current role? So you're somewhere and you're doing something and you're like, I think maybe I could do more, right? But maybe you felt trapped in like how much time you've invested, how much energy, how much resources, how much money. Um, how many people are kind of like thinking that way, feeling that way? I'd love to kind of hear everyone. I feel that every day. Okay, so that I think that some people really kind of struggle with that. And so I think when we think about like what does redesigning look like, right? That's something that we should think about. And as it comes to you, right, feel free to use the chat, feel free to raise your hands up. And if I see you raise your hand up, I'll definitely call you out. So, but that's definitely something that that I know that a lot of high achievers are struggling with. And so the one thing I want us to think about when you're thinking about redesigning is that you're not starting over, right? You're starting from experience, right? Because this is the truth that a lot of us need to understand. It's not scratch. So it's not like, okay, I'm leaving everything behind and I'm going a different direction. I would say that you're starting with skills that you have built over time. You're starting with relationships. You're starting with reputation, craving more. I agree. And maybe you're starting with capital. Maybe you've built something from that, the career that that you've had. Maybe you've built something, right? And now you're thinking, what does redesigning look like? And it's not starting from scratch. You have reps, you built in reps in whatever it is that you're doing that could help you as you move forward. And there's definitely lessons that you've learned. So I would say you're not necessarily starting from scratch. And I would also say that nothing that you've built is wasted. So no education is wasted, no skill, no talent, no relationship, right? None of that is wasted. I think now you just need to think how you can refine it as you think about maybe pivoting or redesigning. But I don't think you should throw away your foundation. I think that's very important, right? And now it's just like, okay, what is the next step, right? I think that's how we need to rethink that. And so I want to ask kind of as you're thinking, like, and maybe you're here or you're listening, right? Or you're watching the recording, and maybe you're like, okay, I really think I want to redesign my life, right? Maybe it looks a little different. Maybe it's building something on the side. Maybe it's changing roles in the same career that you're in, right? So I would ask, like, what have you mastered in your current role that you think would still be valuable anywhere else you go, right? So because I want us to kind of think through that to help you realize that there's a lot that you have, that you own, that you have become that can take you anywhere you want to go. So if you had to think about like something that you've done really well in your current role that would still be valuable elsewhere, like if anybody wants to unmute and shout it out, or if you want to toss it in the chat, but I want you to kind of see that you're not a beginner, right? You're not starting again, you're not starting from scratch, you're starting with experience. So if you wanted to just toss it in the chat, like what that looks like, um, I would, or unmute yourself and just kind of respond. Time management, love that. And you can take that anywhere. So in the comment is I've mastered time management 100%. And that can go anywhere with you as maybe you build something new. So that's a thank you for sharing that. Anything else? Like for me, I guess I could think about maybe like communication. So just, learning how to communicate. And I think to some degree, leadership as I've built, right? And that I think can go anywhere and think about anything that I'm building. So if anybody else is thinking, feel free to jump to drop it in the chat or again, unmute yourself. But those are things that, or even like how to create systems like from I heard time management for if it could even be like project management as you think about redesigning, right? What else? I'm trying to think of other things that maybe I have learned that I could take with me elsewhere. um Negotiation is another one, so like how to negotiate, whether it's for others, for yourself, what you want. Maybe it's even contract or building. So I think that's something, empathy. I like that. I like that. So that's something that you can take with you. But so again, right, I just want us to be thinking about how do we redesign our career? What does that look like? So I was thinking about it in like a three layer framework, right? The idea is that you don't want to escape, right? You don't want to run away. You just want to figure out like, how can I maybe take something away, right? So that first layer is what can you take away? And I think the question that you should ask yourself is like in your current career, what is draining you? What is the thing that you're like, I don't want to do this anymore? What is that thing that is draining you, right? Because then maybe you can take that away as you redesign what a new career or a new life could look like. So like, is it the schedule, right? Or is it maybe lack of creativity? You're doing the same thing over and over, right? So I think the question is not like, oh, I hate my career, I hate what I'm doing, right? Maybe the question is like, what can you take away? What can you subtract that is not, that is not helping you reach your full potential? That's one way that I kind of thought through what this could be like, because a lot of times, right, it's not the profession, it might be the structure, it might be something that like an easy change could help you love what you're doing a little bit better. So I would say that first layer is maybe to take away. And then the second layer, I think, is like maybe identify ways that you can like shape shift, if that's the best way I can think about, or like you can expand in what you're currently doing. So if you had, let's say if you looked at your work, right, maybe you could ask yourself, is there like a small piece that I could redesign, right? Maybe like 20% of what you currently do. And you could ask yourself, like, if I change that piece, would it help me? So you've taken away, right? And now you're like, you're change, maybe you're like expanding what you currently do, dropping something and then replacing it with something else, right? So like if I had to think, right, maybe for me, in the line of like leadership, right? Maybe more leadership and less execution could be something that I'm like, okay, if I'm building, right? If I'm building something, that's maybe what that looks like for me. So less inside and more kind of leadership and overhead and strategy. That's something that I'm thinking about. So if you thought about like, and again, toss stuff in the chat as you're thinking, what could you add? So one of the things was maybe like not as much creativity, right? Let's say you're in marketing and you're like, I really want to tap into that. So maybe it could look like 20% could be carved out into being, tapping into more of your creative side. And for some, right, it could be more teaching. So maybe your job or your career maybe doesn't allow for that. And so maybe you could build that in. But that's also another way that you could think about how you can expand your current role. And it's not necessarily add more, right? It's really take something away. Number one was subtract, but then two is like, how can you expand? So again, right, redesign is not leaving. It's like shift, you shift into something that you really want. I'm hoping to take more feedback and work on my expertise to get better. Love that. So again, right, that's something maybe that you want to change. And so we talked about subtracting, we talked about, expanding and replacing. And then we could also think about the third layer, I would say, is maybe adding. So now this one is, so you have this career, right? And how do you redesign it? And redesigning it could be maybe you're building something quietly on the side, while you're keeping your stability in your career, right? So like, what could that look like, right? Is that like a side business? Is that social media content? Is it teaching? Is it some sort of advisory role? But what could you add on the side that could help you still like enjoy your career, love it, but use it as leverage? We talked about that last week. And so I wanted to kind of bring it back. And it could be like consulting, right? That's also something that you could do on the side. But a lot of successful transitions, please hear me, they happen gradually. They don't happen dramatically. So it's not like, yes, today I decided and tomorrow I'm going to jump ship. I don't think there may be some people who did that successfully, but I think for the most part, right, it's not dramatic. I hear sales, love that. So thinking about that. So that's just something that I'm thinking about, like, what could you do quietly on the side? The idea is you don't just quit. You don't, you really think about expanding. You think about testing stuff. You maybe validate what the side thing or the 20% extra that you have implemented or the thing you've taken away, right? And then you reposition. So that's kind of how I think about, or how you should think about, or both of us think about this strategy, right? As a way to redefine. But I think as I was kind of thinking through this, right? There is, or there might be an emotional barrier that is stopping you from redefining, expanding, adding. And I think that that's probably the real fear, right? And the real fear is not about starting over. A lot of us can start over. I think the real fear is maybe what will people think, right? People who have known you doing this specific thing. And if they think about you changing, what would they think? Another real fear is like, am I wasting my degree, my career? Am I wasting that thing, right? The thing I spent, for me, like how many years? Maybe 11, 12 plus years, right? Are you wasting that, right? And so that's a real fear. So it's not really necessarily even about like starting over, but it's some of these fears that plague you. So like, am I betraying my past self? Is that a thought that has come to your mind, right? And then the last one's like, what if I fail, right? That's another thought that people might have that you're afraid of. Because a lot of us who have worked really hard, we fear looking inconsistent, right? Today it's one thing, tomorrow it's another thing. Like people might not trust you if that is how you appear. But I would say, right, evolution as you build and as you shape shift, right? It's not inconsistency. I think it's growth. And I think we're all allowed to grow. I think that's very, very important. So I would say you should you should not stay the same, right? To protect your image. If you are miserable, if you're unhappy, I think that is the fastest way to really resent your life. And I tell, my team, I tell the people I talk to, like, we have this one life. And the question is, what are you going to do with it, right? So I would say if you are unhappy, right? Or if you think you have something really cool that is on your heart that you're like, how can I include this into redesigning my life, my career? I would say think about, adding a little on the side. I would say think about changing 20%. I'd say think about subtracting, right? And so I just want that to kind of sit, right? If you stay the same in your current position to protect your image, right? You're going to not like yourself. You're going to not like your life. And so what does that look like if you made a little change? So I always want to leave very practical, right? And so maybe you ask yourself this week, right? What is one thing that you want less from what you're doing right now? And then you could also ask, what is one thing you want more, right? And so think about how you can, again, subtract and add. And then think about like one small move that you can make these next 30 days. So maybe if you subtract it, it's doing less of that thing. Or if you add it, it's changing 20% to be something that you really love. Or even thinking about something on the side, like I mentioned, teaching, a side business, consulting. Like, what does that look like? Because at the end of the day, right, you should keep it practical. If this is something you're thinking about, if this is something you're considering, then keep it practical. It's not supposed to be dramatic. It's really supposed to just be intentional, right? That is kind of the idea behind this. So this is quick, and this is just like to help you think through another area of your career, of your life, as you think about building an expansive life. So I want to leave you with this final thought, right? You're not your title. You're not just you're not your job description, you're not your current structure. All of that is not who you are, right? You are a collection of like your talent and your skills and your abilities and your capabilities and all the things, right? And all of that make you who you are. So in your career, you're allowed to evolve, you're allowed to shape shift, right? And careers actually also evolve, right? They change over time. And so you are allowed to decide, okay, this used to be what I love. This used to be the thing. But now, as you've grown, right? Because this is all about growth, as you've grown and you've evolved, right? That means something new for you. And so you don't need to shut it down. You don't need to burn it down. You just need to start thinking about, how do I pivot? How do I redesign with intention? Because I think that is the biggest thing that you can take away from all of this, right? So I would say start where you are. That is the biggest thing. And then build with what you've mastered. So the skills that you know, right? The skills, the talents, the education, the relationships, all of those things that you've built, like use that, right, as leverage. And then from there, I would say expand to what you're becoming. And if you redesign your life or your career, right, with that strategy, you are bound to be very successful. And I say that from experience, right? But I don't want anyone who's listening to feel like, okay, I'm stuck in that thing. So start from where you are, build on what you've mastered, and use that as leverage, and then expand into whatever it is that you want to become, whatever it is you want to grow into. So that's all that I got today. You're not starting from zero, you're moving forward with experience, clarity, and purpose. And that is correct, right? So that's what you have to remember. It's not leaving the past behind, but it's using that to build. So if anyone has any final thoughts, thanks to everyone who was jumping in the comments. Your past experiences weren't wasted or accidental. They shaped your perspective and judgment you carry now. So I love that. So if there's if any questions or any thoughts, additional thoughts, please put them in the comments. Thank you. Thank you. This was a powerful session. I love it. But yes, I think it comes from a place of experience. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, have a wonderful rest of your week. Let's go out and let's truly live very expansive lives. Have a great evening, everyone.